we're going to begin because it's actually after 11 a little bit. Okay, we're not running exactly with train schedules, but then you folks could always argue we have no place to go urgently in particular. So what's a minute or two waiting for the internet? Okay, fine. So here we are, and I'm just trying to get all the participants up on the screen, but I don't think I can do that because there are too many of you. Baruch Hashem, that's very nice. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like that. You guys apparently can see me, and I can see some of you, and it's time to continue with special to everyone, and with the hope that we will have better Bekarim Tovim in the future. But we continue our inquiry into the Aseret Adibrot, alias the Ten Commandments, and we will build on some of the understandings that we developed last time. Where I'd like to go today as the last two segments of our session, of our topic, is to talk a little bit about the mitzvot as indicated and listed by Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch, magnificent piece of work, probably from around the 13th century, Barcelona. And believe it or not, it is such a popular work, as it has been for hundreds of years, and we're still not sure precisely who the author was. This is the reward you get for doing a good job with the tradition. And after all, who you were is irrelevant. It's what you leave behind that really counts. So we got the Sefer HaChinuch. We don't know exactly who it was that was the author, but we know he was a Levi. That's clear. So anybody out there who's a Levi can take pride in that. And we're going to take a look at his organization of the mitzvot that are included in the Aseret HaDibrot. He follows Rambam most of the time on most things, by the way. But I thought you might be interested in taking a little trip with me through the Sefer HaChinuch to see his 14 mitzvot, got that number? 14 mitzvot that he finds in the Aseret HaDibrot. And he, of course, is a major voice in our tradition of making the point that the Aseret HaDibrot, that the Ten Commandments, so-called, are not, the way I did the title of this. There are 14, and that's just to begin. Okay, so let's take a look, one after the other. First, he says, the first mitzvah of the decalogue is mitzvat ha'amana b'mitziut Hashem yitbarach. This is the mitzvah, the command of belief in the reality of Hashem. Belief in the reality of Hashem. He says, L'hamin sheyesh la'olam Eloah echad, to believe that there is in this world, I would say this universe, one Hashem, shehimtzi kol hanimtza, who created all reality, umikocho v'chefzo haya kol mashahu, and through his power and his desire and his will, everything came into being. V'shahaya v'shiyeh la'adayad. He was, he is, he will always exist forever. V'chihu hotzianu me'eretz Mitzrayim v'natan lanu haTorah. And he brought us out of Egypt. I like how that's put in almost as a second thought. He brought us out of Egypt, and he gave us the Torah. Shenamar, and then he gives his proof. He always gives a proof for each statement of the 14 mitzvot in the Aseret HaDibrot. Shenamar b'techilat netinat haTorah, the beginning of the giving of the Torah. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, and so forth, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Interesting, isn't it? That's number one. That's belief in the existence of Hashem. And many people, of course, miss this mitzvah for what it really is, because there is no lashon tzivui in it. There's no imperative language in the proposition. Anochi Hashem. Okay. Nonetheless, doesn't matter. We're doing our job on the Asarat HaDibrot to show that the Asarat HaDibrot are really 14 Dibrot, and the first one, according to Maimonides and according to Sefer HaChinuch, is what we just said. Second one, he says, Shalom na'amin Elohut bilti Hashem levado, that we should not believe in any other godness except Hashem alone. Okay, first is to believe that Hashem exists. The second one is not only does he exist, but he is the only Hashem, the only, how shall I say, God of the universe, and we are not permitted to believe in any other one. Here we have, he makes it quite to the point, said, Shalom na'amin Elohim zulati Hashem yitbarach levado. We only can believe in Hashem. Shenemar, as it is said, Lo yehiyeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. You shall not have any other gods. Al panai, I would translate as it should be translated, in my presence. While I exist, there are no other gods. And since Hashem is going to exist forever, so there's not going to be any other gods altogether, and we cannot believe in them. Okay, he goes on to say, V'zot ha-mitzvah, miklal ha-sheva mitzvot, this mitzvah about only believing in Hashem is one of the 7 mitzvot that were given to all humankind, B'nai Noach. That's the truly, by the way, I have to make a side note, that truly is the universal part of the Torah. This is aside from the fact that much of the world would like to make the decalogue universal. We talked about that, the moral law, so to speak, which means for everybody. We put that aside. That doesn't work. It's not true. But we do have a tradition of something in the Torah itself which is meant for all humanity. This is what we call the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 commandments that were given to the descendants of Noach. That means to all people. And our sages in the Gemara, our sages in the Gemara derived how these 7 find their proofs in the text of the Torah, which we will not go into right now. That's not our point. But nonetheless, he says, pay attention that mitzvah number 2, namely, that we should only believe in Hashem, is from Miklal Hasheva Mitzvot Shenitztavu Kol B'nei Ha'olam B'chlalan, that all human beings were commanded to. Aval Mikol Makom, I love this line that's coming up now. He said, nevertheless, Chilukin Yesh B'Pratim, there are differences of opinion in the details, Bein Yisrael L'Sha'ar Ha'umot, between the Jews and the other people in the world. That's a magnificent understatement. Yeah, you could say there are a few differences in the way we read the Decalogue. There are a few differences in the way we read the Torah altogether, which we will continue to discuss ad infinitum. But here on this simple thing, he has to talk in guarded language a little bit, because it was becoming increasingly difficult to talk straightforwardly in a time of strict censorship, especially as various versions of his work were being duplicated and promulgated throughout the Jewish world. So there is censorship taking place. I told you about one last week, which is an interesting one. At least I think it's as interesting. So if I think that it's interesting, so I'm sure you'll find that it's interesting also. The meaning say that you stand up for the Asarat HaDibrot when it's read because you agree with us that this is the most important part of the Torah and the only real major part, the only part of the Torah, the major part of the Torah. So that's why you stand up when it's read. And that's why you put it before the Shema when you daven. According to the Gemara, it comes before the Shema, etc. Well, You remember that the comment there was, and it's in Rashi and a few others, it says this is all done mipnei taromet haminim. This, we changed our practice because of the outcry of the heretics, minim it's called. And then we found in the uncensored text of the Gemara, which is fascinating, fabulous reading, by the way, for those of you that ever get to that level. What does an unexpurgated, unedited, uncensored text of the Gemara look like, sound like, and say? And one of the things we found is that instead of meaning over there, it says Talmidei Yeshu, the disciples of Jesus. Yeah, it actually said that in the Gemara. The disciples of Jesus said, look, you stand for the Aseret HaDibrot because you agree with us that that's the only real part of Torah. Okay, having said that, he uses the word minim here. He says, chilukim, yesh chilukim pratim. In the details, there are differences of opinion between Yisrael and Shar Omot, between Israel and the other people. And when he says other people, by the way, he means all Christians in large measure, but not necessarily only. He does not. Okay, I'll leave it at that. So that's Sefer HaChinuch on the second mitzvah. The second mitzvah, that we only are allowed to believe in Hashem. He never tells us what it means, by the way, to believe. And so you may want to ponder that for future times, or maybe even ponder it as Shavuot is on its way. What does it mean to believe in Hashem? How do I do that? What are the steps? What are the measures? But we're not going to do it now. Okay, we're up to the third mitzvah, according to Sefer HaChinuch and according to Rambam. He says, Shelo la'asot pesel, not to make statues. Not to make statues. Doesn't say what kind of statues yet. We're going to get some detail on this, but it says lo ta'aseh l'chafesa. Okay, he says shelo na'aset salamim she'ya'avodu. We're not permitted to make images that people will worship. Va'afilu lo avdam ha'oseh otam. And even if one who makes a statue did not actually worship the statue, ha'asiyah levad asura, the very making of a statue is forbidden, laharchik hamichshol, in order to keep us farther away from error. The ein hefresh bein sheyaseh biyado, there is no difference between one who makes a statue with his own hands, yitzaveh la'asot, or he asks somebody else to do it. Shenemar, as it is said, lo ta'aseh l'chafeso v'chol temunah. You shall not make any statues or any representations. You are, I assume, well aware of the fact of how much difficulty this has caused throughout the ages amongst Jews and amongst others, but especially among our own people. What does it mean? Does it mean we're not allowed to be artists? That we can't make any pictures of anything? Pesel v'chol temunah says don't make statues or any other representation. Temunah, picture. Okay, none at all, whether they have to do with avodah zarah, with idolatry or not. Not always very clear here. And many of our people in centuries past and up to the present actually consider that this proposition in the decalogue is actually a prohibition against artistic representation. Bichlal. We even have some Jews that will not have themselves photographed because a photograph is also considered by some to be a temunah, a representation of life, of reality, of a living world, and forbidden to us. Nonetheless, he doesn't get into that kind of detail. He just says that we're not allowed to make a temunah, a pesel, for worship, whether we make it ourselves or whether we have it made. He makes it clear, and I think the Rambam did too, Shelo na'aset salamim sheya'avdu. They're not permitted to make images that will be worshipped. Okay, that's 3. We're up to number 4 of the decalogue, so-called. You won't ever want to use the word decalogue again, I hope, after you've gone through this class. You'll find yourself tongue-tied, just like I do. I don't know what to call it. I can't call it the Ten Commandments. And I call it Aseret Dibrot. Well, it's called Aseret HaDvarim in the Torah itself. But Green, would you raise your hand if you can hear my voice? Hey, good. Sounds good. I guess we're back. I don't see all of you on my screen, but I'm not going to worry about that. If Rabbi Green is hearing me, I'm going to assume that the rest of you can hear me, and Abby Resnick can hear me. Okay, fine. Let's continue from where we were. Okay. We're up to number 4, commandment number 4, according to Sefer HaChinuch, and he says as follows: Shelo lehishtachavot la'avodah zarah, not to bow down to idol worship, to idolatry, idol worship, we'll call it, avodah zarah. He says, Shelo lehishtachavot la'avodah zarah, va'avodah zarah hi, what we mean by avodah zarah, kol sheya'avod zulati ha'el baruch hu. We mean to say by avodah zarah, the act whereby an individual worships anybody but Hashem. Avodah zarah. He kol sheya'avod zulati ha'el baruch hu. Worshipping anybody but Hashem. Shenemar lo tishtachaveh lahem v'lo ta'avdeim. You shall not bow down to them, it says in the Decalogue, and you shall not worship them. Okay, this seems like a pretty easy, straightforward one. But again, I remind you, we're still up into the very early part of the Decalogue, and we've already got 4 mitzvot out of 14, according to Sefer HaChinuch. Avodah Zarah. One of the questions that is worth pondering, I think, as Shavuos comes, and maybe even during Shavuot, is, and I like always to challenge my students with this over the years, what exactly is wrong with Avodah Zarah? What is the innate, inherent wrongness of the very act itself? And associated with that is the question of, let's say, if you say that there is more than one deity in the universe, what's wrong with more than one? You have to be able to articulate that in some fashion and to work this out in one's mind. What's wrong with more than one? In essence, now we're talking about, not just because it's called wrong, but what makes it inherently wrong. We're not going to do that today, to say the least, but anyway, I throw out the challenge. Number 5, here we go. Shelo la'avod avodah zarah. Can you believe it? It says you're not permitted to do idol worship. It sounds like we just talked about that, didn't we? We said don't bow down to it, don't make any images, etc., etc., etc. Now says the Sefer HaChinuch, Shelo na'avod shum avodah zarah ba'olam. We should not worship any idol worship, any pagan worship in the world, b'dvarim shedarkam she'ovdim ota hamaminim ba, in the way that any of the believers of Avodah Zarah do it. V'af al pi she'ein avodata ba'achat me'arba avodot she'amrarnu l'mala, even though this is somewhat different from the other Avodah Zarahs that we have talked about previously. Mikevan she'avada b'ma shedarka lahe'aved chayav. If you do worship of an alien worship system in any form, you are liable for violating this. You may even copy what the pagans do as a way of showing disdain for them and disgrace. Bizayon, you do it to make fun. Kagon, hapoer, we won't go into all the details, to do all the things that are associated with Avodah Zarah that you, as a Jew, consider laughable, disgusting, incredible, whatever it happens to be. We're not allowed to do that under any circumstances, no matter what. Like it says, v'lo ta'avdeim, you may not worship them. Worship them, ta'avdeim, in any way, shape, or form, altogether, for fun, for serious, whatever the reason happens to be. Okay. That was the fifth. Here comes number 6 now. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. Shalo li shava lashav. We are not permitted to swear, to make an oath, lashav, empty, for emptiness, for nothing, unnecessary, I would say. Shalo nishba levatala, he says, that we should not swear meaninglessly. Shenemar lo tisat shem Adonai Elohecha lashav. As it says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God, lashav, usually translated in vain, in vanity, in nothingness. This is actually a little bit easier to explain with our own commentary, I think. And that is, I'm drawing from many of the sages, of course, when I say this. One of the things that the sages talk about is an example of Shavuah levatala. Shavuah levatala, a meaningless oath, would be to take an oath. I swear it by God that it is now the daytime. They actually use that example. That would be called Shvuat Shav. That would be called a needless, an empty, a vain oath, because everybody in the world agrees that it is daytime. So to swear on something that every human being would automatically agree is the truth would be one kind of a shvuat shav, an empty asseveration. And the sages give other examples of statements that people can make in which invoking God's name, which is the problem here, on something that does not require it is considered a wrongful act. Let me repeat that. Invoking Hashem as your witness, if you will, invoking Hashem's name as your witness is prohibited when the asseveration that is being made is needless, is empty, is void. Okay, that's the basic meaning that our sages have placed on this part of the decalogue. I don't find anything particularly profoundly moving in all of it, except to say something which we'll pick up a little bit later on in the decalogue, and that is invoking Hashem at all in human affairs, especially in legal affairs, civil law. Invoking Hashem is maybe the most serious act that a person could possibly do. And because that's the case, we'll talk about it a little bit more shortly. Because that's the case, invoking Hashem for the sake of something that doesn't need the invocation of Hashem is considered a wrongful use, a misuse of Hashem's very being for a vapid and empty purpose. Number 7, mitzvat kiddush Shabbat b'dvarim. Listen how he says it, though. It's very important. This is the mitzvah of kiddush Shabbat, of the sanctification of Shabbos b'dvarim, with words. This is a biggie now. Most people don't get this, and this is another area of misunderstanding of the Decalogue, which our short course here is addressing. He says, L'daber devarim b'yom Shabbat b'hachnasato v'chein b'yitziato, to speak words on the Sabbath as it comes in and as it leaves, sheyehiyeh bahen zecher gedulat hayom, in which the words reflect the notion of the greatness of the day, uma'alato, and its high level, v'havdalato, and its differentiation, l'shabeach, l'shevach, misha'ar hayamim shalafanav yacharav, to show somehow in your words your recognition that the Shabbat is greater in scope and in meaning and in depth and in holiness than any of the other days of the week. Shenemar Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho, as it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I rush to add now an important note, which some of you can apply to other aspects of your learning of Torah, and that is Zachor, Zecher, basically in the Tanakh, means to mention. It is not essentially a cerebral function of memory. That's the point I want to hammer away. Zachor in the Torah is not essentially a cerebral function. Zachor is mention, or if it is a cerebral function, it must of necessity be accompanied by a movement of the mouth and of the expression of sounds, what we would call language. To mention. The best translation of Zachor, then, for the decalogue is mention the Sabbath day to reflect its holiness. And then we have lots of different examples through the ages, hundreds of examples. Go to the market, you're picking out food, you say, oh, this is a nice chicken. This chicken will be just right for Shabbos meal. That would be doing this mitzvah. It's interesting, isn't it? That would be the doing of the mitzvah exactly as our sages have understood. This chicken will make a wonderful Shabbos meal. That's it. You said to you, Shabbos, it's for Shabbos, it's good. Or as we do, many of us do this all the time. A delicacy. You say, oh, this is nice. Let's have this for Shabbos. We'll put it aside and we'll have it for Shabbos because of Gedulat Hayom, the greatness of the day, the significance of the day. That's Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. For those for whom Zachor means to remember, well, then you can see how far that gets you. What does that do? Remember what? How do you know what you remember? What do you remember? How do I know you remember? How do you know you're remembering? What is it? Okay. Number 8. Hey, we're almost at the end, almost at 10, and there are more than 10. Okay, it says Shelo la'asot melacha b'Shabbat. How about that one? Shelo la'asot melacha b'Shabbat. Not to do any manual labor on Shabbat. Shelo la'asot melacha b'yom HaShabbat. Anachnu, for us, not to do it. V'lo naniach la'asot levanenu. We can't leave it to be done by our children, v'avadenu, and our servants, uvahamotenu, and for our animals, shenemar lo ta'aseh kol malacha. Don't do any Shabbos labor, malachot of Shabbat, of which you know there are 39 major categories yet. This, by the way, you ponder this, and given what we've been talking about now, this is already our second session. We're outside the realm of what the world considers to be the so-called moral law. If he's right, Sefer HaChinuch is right, and if Rambam is right, and of course they're right, the entirety of the Jewish tradition teaches this, Malacha, don't do Malacha on Shabbat, then we understand that the world at large is very distant from, quote unquote, observing the 10 Commandments as they might claim that they are. Malachot of Shabbat. Okay. Number 9. Mitzvat kibud av ha'em. The mitzvah of honoring father and mother. Lechabed ha'av ha'em. To honor parents. Shenemar kabed et avicha v'et imecha, uva haperush, and we see we have an explanation of this in Kiddushin in the Talmud, a quite extensive explication of this, by the way. Ezehu kibud, and part of the language is what does it mean to honor? Ma'achil u'mashkeh, you bring food and drink for a parent. Malbishu mechaseh, you help them get dressed. You cover them up. Machnisu motzi, you bring them into the house. You take them out of the house, etc. A very noble part of the Gemara deals with kibud av va'em, and that brings me to make what I would call a major observation here for the sake of the 2 sessions that we're spending together. And that is one of the most important, if not the most important, I don't know, aspect of the nature of how our tradition reads the Torah is the idea that the tradition wants to measure and to specify how, in fact, such and such an act is accomplished. You look at the decalogue again, and you will see that there are very few, if any, definitions of what to do, of what not to do or what to do, but how to do it and how much to do it. Absent. What tells us the answer to the how to do and what to do? The tradition. This is an excellent example of it. Kibud av va'em. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah you have to help your parents get covered with a blanket, to help them get dressed, to help them go in the door, out the door, eat their food, drink their tea. Where does it say that? There's nothing whatsoever about that in all of the Torah. And yet for us and for our tradition, kibud av va'em is a very specific set of actions with no end to it, by the way, which shouldn't be a surprise, I suppose, but a very specific formulation of actions. And that brings me again to reiterate the major point that I'm aiming for here. And that is that the point of Torah is that our tradition wants to be explicit in telling us how precisely, as precisely as we can get it, a particular mitzvah should be observed. I often like to use the example of payah, for instance, leaving the corners of the field uncut down. Payah ends the corners. Because the Torah could say, you leave the, don't cut down the ends of the field. You have to leave it for the widow and the orphan and the poor and Ruth and Boaz. And you got all that. Then I'm thinking to myself, if I'm a field owner and you tell me not to cut the corners of my field, and if I can conceive of my field as being a square or something like that, and I have a geometric mind, I would say to you that I could figure out how to leave 4 corners of my field without having lost hardly any grain whatsoever. What's a corner? That's a question again. I have to leave the corner. So what's a corner? I'll show you a corner. In geometry, I can make a corner from, you wouldn't believe how small the corner is. And of course, what we learn from our tradition is that a corner has to be at least a 60th of the area of the field. That's not in the Torah. It's not anywhere in the Tanakh. It doesn't say 60th. But our tradition says it's a 60th because that's how it's done. Because the Torah wants us, and the tradition wants us to observe it and to be as meticulous with the mitzvot as we possibly humanly can. So what do I have here? I have here kibud av va'em, which is a great example of it. All these things, machil, mashke, you feed them, you give them to drink, you dress them, and so forth. Number 10, shelo laharog naki, he says, not to kill innocently, not to kill an innocent person. Shelo laharog naki, as it says, shenemar lo tirtzach, you shall not, whatever you shall not murder, we would say. You shall not murder. I don't know, however, I was brought up in the public school system and in much of my education with the notion that the decalogue says, thou shalt not kill. I'm sure many of you have the same echo in your ear from years past. Thou shalt not kill. It took a long time before I finally came around to the awareness that the Torah doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder. and that the whole notion of the difference between murder and kill is an exceedingly complex thing, which most people get wrong. We have, for instance, in our tradition, something really nice from Rashbam, from the Rashbam, the grandson of one of the grandsons of Rashi. He says, Kol ritzicha v'harega b'chinam hi b'chol makom lo tirtzach. Every tirtzach, every killing act of this is harega b'chinam, is an unwarranted killing, an unwarranted killing everywhere, unwarranted killing. Harega b'chinam, an undeserved killing everywhere. He means even the Gentiles by that. It's part of that universality of the Torah, that notion of the moral code. Don't murder. So he says, okay, he, speaking about himself, Shmuel ben Meir says, why are we talking here? Why does this have to say? Why does the Torah have to say, or why does the decalogue have to say, don't murder? Everybody in the world knows don't murder. He says like this: here I am told don't murder, so that I understand that it means don't kill a person who is innocent. And if you happen to kill a person by accident, which the Torah deals with, then you are not guilty of murder. Okay, so it tells me here, don't tirtzach, lo tirtzach, because the Torah wants me to know that other ritzicha, any other killing, I should say, a killing of a person, which is not intentional, is not punished. Okay, then he says, Teshuva l'minim v'hoduli. He said, I gave this little talk to the minim, you mean to the Christians. It was Rashbam in France. I told them this, v'hoduli, and they agreed with me. What? They agreed with me. Ve'afal pi sheyesh b'sifreihem, even though in their versions of the books, in their books, ani amit v'achayeh, that in Deuteronomy 32, Perek Lamed Bet, verse 39, that in their books, ani amit v'achayeh, it says ani amit v'achayeh, Hashem is talking in Ha'azinu. I bring death and I bring life. Amit v'achayeh, b'lashon Latin. He says in the Latin language, which that's what I find very interesting, that he knew Latin and he was able to argue with them in their own texts. B'lashon Latin shel lo tirtzach, don't murder, lo dictacu. They weren't being careful when they translated the same verb in Latin, oppidere, to murder. They translated it the same way in Devarim, in Deuteronomy. It's not, in other words, the way they translated in Latin, Jerome, the individual who translated the Bible into Latin. Ani amit va'achayeh, says in Devarim 32, I bring death and I bring life. Amit, they translated with the same Latin verb as they did with the verb rotseach, supposedly murder. So they come up with the result, bizarre as it may sound, is Hashem is saying in Deuteronomy, I murder and I bring to life. And they all agreed with him that this is unbelievable. They mistranslated. They mistranslated. Haim lo dictacu, he says. They weren't careful. I love it. They weren't careful in their translation of the Latin. So much for Rashbam. I know I had to mention him a little bit at least before we were done. I'm going on. Here we are, and what do I have? We have Shalom Laharog Naki. We did that was 10, by the way. Number 11 now. Shalom Legalot Ervat Eshet Ish. This is against adultery. Shelo lavo al eshet ish shenamar lo tinaf. As it says, you shall not commit adultery. Tinaf. And one of the things, well, what does it mean? You should not commit adultery. You can imagine how we can continue to argue about this, especially in light of the fact that in times of Tanakh, a man could have multiple wives, but a wife could not have multiple husbands. So a man who had sexual relations, a married man, who had sexual relations with another woman unmarried and not belonging to anybody, was not guilty of the violation of this mitzvah in the Torah, because it says lo tinaf. Later on, our tradition included it. But when the Torah presents the case, tinaf, adultery, is not considered the fact when, in fact, the man is, I should say, the woman who is involved is not married. Okay. Number 12, shalo lignov nefesh miYisrael. This is a biggie. Not to steal a soul in Israel, not to do kidnapping. Not to do kidnapping. One of the most important elements of misunderstanding of the decalogue is to read thou shalt not steal as thou shalt not steal. For us, it is thou shalt not steal other human beings. That's a big difference, that it has to do with kidnapping and it does not have to do with property. Let me pursue this a little bit. It says, shalo lignov nefesh miYisrael. We're not lo tignov, shall not steal. Uva haperush. And we have an extensive commentary in Mechilta and Sanhedrin and so forth, she'v'gonev nefashot hakatuv medaber, that the text of the Torah is speaking about kidnapping. There's no question about it. We have extensive literature to that point, that the text is talking about kidnapping. Here, one thing this might interest you in Sanhedrin, by the way, is a kind of a proof of what we just said, but it isn't a proof, but it could be a proof. And that is, according to the Gemara, lo tignov has a gematria that is gonev nefesh. It's really terrific. I had forgotten about this, and then I rediscovered it in preparing for this class. Lo tignov, you shall not steal, has the gematria value of gonev nefesh, stealing a person. So if you need a proof that the Torah is talking about kidnapping and not property, you got it right there. There it is, right for you. Okay, Saforno, one of my favorite Italians. The Italian Meforshim are among my favorite people. What does he say? He said, Lo tignov, you shall not steal. Bechlal geneva, in the category of theft, is genevat nefashot, stealing people, genevat mamon, stealing money or property, v'genevat da'at habriot, and deception, literally stealing the other guy's awareness, deception. Afal pi she'ikar ha'azhara, even though the essence of this warning in the Torah is al genevat nefashot, is about stealing people, davar halame binyano kamo shelamdu azal. It's still like our sages said, it includes ultimately all kinds of theft. Well, again, a great example of how we differ from what the world thinks it understands when it talks about the Yasad HaDibrot. And I have here, Shalo laha'id b'sheker, not to give testimony, false testimony. Shalo laha'id edut sheker, not to give false testimony, shenemar, as it is said, lo ha'neverecha ed sheker. Don't raise false witness testimony against the other guy. It doesn't matter right now for us in Devarim. It calls it Eid Shav. So it's Eid Shav, Eid Sheker, means it's wrong, and we are not permitted to do that. An observation that may be of interest to you, and that is the problem here of giving false testimony is the problem of invoking Hashem as a witness on your behalf. It boils down to this, if I can kind of squeeze down all the Jewish jurisprudence on the matter of testimony and court procedure. That is, as a case progresses, and the court will begin to find that it cannot decide on behalf of which of the litigants to go, they're evened up, let's say, for one reason or another. But one of the litigants says, I swear by Hashem, by God, that I blah, 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 whatever to do, in order to get support for his position. That's heavy-duty stuff in the Torah. Why? Because invoking Hashem as a witness on your behalf is using Hashem, which you can do if you're telling the truth. We frequently do that. People have to give an oath to Hashem that I'm going to tell you the truth. When you know ab initio that you're making it up simply in order to force the hand of the court to find in your favor, that is a gross misuse of the presence and the essence of Hashem, and you have made a violation of exceeding magnitude. Last one, here it is, number 14, Sefer Chinuch. Shelo la'alot b'machshavteinu, we shouldn't think, la'asot tachpula, to plan some strategies, lakachat lanu mashahu lezulatenu, to in order to come into possession of something, property owned by somebody else, me'achenu, from other Jews. Shenemar lo tachmod beit reacha, you shall not covet. Never knew what the word covet was until I was already, I don't know, in college. Covet, we don't even use it. Okay, what does it mean? Kvar hochichu zichronam levracha mipasuk acher. Our sages have already proven from other sources in the Torah, which is the book of Devarim, by the way, Devarim Zion. Lo tachmod means lo tachmod v'lakachta alach. You shall not covet, you shall not desire and take for yourself. They're talking about statues and so forth. You should not covet and take for yourself the gold and the silver that is overlaid on these statues. She'isur lav, the lo tachmod, we understand that the prohibition against lo tachmod, that lo tachmod, you shall not covet, eino nigmar, is not completed ad sheyaseh bo ma'aseh, until he actually performs an act. Got that? Ad sheyaseh bo ma'aseh says, importantly for us, we don't have the time to pursue this, but hey, there it is anyway, that lo tachmod is only when it is followed by an act. That raises the whole matter of whether the Torah legislates thought, emotion, notions, or not. Lo tachmod, you shall not covet, you shall not be desirous of, sounds like a thought or an attitude. Can the Torah really legislate attitude? Point I would take is no, it can't. And lo tachmod is not an attitude, is not a sense, is not an appetite. It has to be followed by theft. Okay. Lastly, finished. What was given at Sinai? That's 14 examples of 10. What was given at Sinai? I want to read for you something that you look into on your own, and that's Shemot Perek Kaf Daled, Exodus chapter 24. This is after the decalogue is delivered. Vayavo Moshe, Vayasaper la'am. Moshe came, told the people at Kol Divrei Hashem, all the words of Hashem. V'et Kol HaMishpatim, and all the laws. Vayanam Kol Echad, the people answered, Vayamru Kol HaDevarim, all the things they said, which Hashem has spoken, we will do. Vayichtov Moshe et Kol Divrei Hashem, and then Moshe wrote down all the words of Hashem. That's in 2 Pesukim, 4 times the word Kol. Point being this: much more was given at Sinai than 10 inscriptions on 2 tablets of stone. That's the point that I want to make. That it's the Torah Kula, the entire Torah that was given, is the point of it all, and presents therein another argument for not making the decalogue as significant as it has become in the world, the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world. It's all that Hashem had said. Ibn Ezra quotes the Gaon, Saadia Gaon, and he says, Rav Saadia chiber atzarot, v'chalal kol ha-mitzvot be'ela aseret. He said all the mitzvot are included in the Aseret HaDibrot. Saadia Gaon, the philosopher, okay? That is a different example, a different answer to the question of where do we get all the rest of Torah from? So Ramban, Nachmanides, has a statement here. He says, Ki ad kabetet avicha hu keneged Torah shebichtav, in the Decalogue, up to and including honor thy father and thy mother, is the written Torah, Torah shebichtav, mikan v'elach keneged Torah shebal peh. After, from honor thy father and thy mother to the end, is equal to Torah shebal peh, the oral law. Ramban, again, saying, in effect, it's all that was given at Sinai is our Torah. We have here in Shemot Rabbah, I'm going to maybe have to speed this up a little bit. I'll finish with this, just 2 more minutes. Amar Rabbi Elazar, this is from Shemot Rabbah. Kol Torah toluya b'mishpat. The entire Torah is dependent on law. Lachach, therefore, Natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, gave dinin achar aseret hadibrot, gave laws after the Decalogue, lefi shahabriot mavirin al adin, because people have a tendency to violate law. V'hu nifra mehem, and he, Hashem, is going to insist that people have to pay the bill for what they did. Umelamed et ba'ei olam, and he's teaching all human beings, Shalo hafach et Sodom ad she'avrat adin, that he only destroyed Sodom after people violated the law, the mishpatim, the judicial elements of the Torah itself. That the Torah is Aseret HaDibrot and everything else that follows it in the Torah. Bringing me to make the last observation, and with this I'll close, and that is, to put it bluntly, straightforwardly, and hopefully evidently in light of what we have studied together, that there is no Torah shebichtav, there is no written Torah without Torah sheba'al peh, without the oral law. Without the oral law, there cannot be any written Torah. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a good Vach and a good Yor and a Chag Sameach. Shavuos is coming up, and perhaps, if at all, there's been any success in this enterprise that we've been involved in, a few more thoughts might come to mind as we celebrate the festival of Shavuot. I wish you all good health and good fortune in every way, and I look forward to studying with you all again. Shalom Litraot.
Hi, excuse me.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Brauner?
Yeah.
Hi, my friends are talking. Hello?
Who's talking?
Yeah, me, right, because basically your last sentence, I think, summed up your whole lecture, basically.
Yes.
Without Baal Peh, all this is, the whole thing is meaningless.
Correct. Precisely, Rabbi Kranzer. It sums up the entire presentation. That's why I saved it for last. Without the Torah Shebichtav, there is no Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is a terrible thing to have to say. We have the Torah Shebichtav. It's right in front of us. We can touch it. Nothing. It goes nowhere.
But it's hard to understand the Torah Shebichtav and not the Torah Sheba'al Peh.
Right.
So we can't teach one without the other, actually.
Right. That's it. That's it.
Shkoach. Thank you very much. Take
Keep
care.
to you, and look to see you all soon in public, closer than 6 feet.
Yes, Hashem. All of us.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.